Hall of Fame voting group, we need to re-examine some careers. And I think we need to re-examine the career of Joe Klecko.
Dang, I want to see how I do against this guy, because he was the best.
Left guard can't handle Klecko.
Just knock the crap out of the guy across from you.
Intensity, bottom line. Never take a play off.
He was incredibly strong.
His just pure raw strength.
He was the same every play. Ball zone.
It was an incredible accomplishment to be dominant at one position in the NFL in your career, but to be dominant at three positions.
Well, hello, Jets fans. This is GreenBean, and today we have a bit more of an important subject. We are going to talk about that man that dominated at three positions during his career in the NFL, the legendary Jet, Joe Klecko. It's amazing. Not only did he make the Pro Bowl at three positions, guys, he was an All-Pro at two, an All-Pro at two different positions in two different defenses. Think of the difference between a 4-3 defensive end and a 3-4 nose tackle. Joe Klecko did them both. Pro Bowl.
Somebody will say, well, what position did he play? He dominated at three.
The two guys in my mind that were the best all around that I ever played in front of were Howie Long and Joe Klecko.
That's what we're talking about here. It is time. We've danced around this one enough. In 2004, the New York Jets honored Joe Klecko by placing him in the Ring of Honor and even retiring his number. He is only the third New York Jet to have his number retired. Obviously, we have the one and only Broadway Joe Namath, and then his receiver, Don Maynard, and now we have Joe Klecko. So his number's retired. He's in the Ring of Honor, yet he is ominously missing from the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It is time, guys. There are Jets players that have been great. As you guys know, I'm a big proponent of Mo Lewis getting some respect. Guys like Kyle Clifton. But way out front, up top, if we may, Joe Klecko is the man that we're talking about. He is the closest that we've ever gotten. That is still not in there. I want to tell you, in 2022, Joe Klecko made it to being a finalist. He was one of two guys in the senior committee selection process. Two men were left. He was beaten out by Oakland Raiders great Cliff Branch, wide receiver, who is no longer with us. God rest his soul. Cliff Branch was a three-time Super Bowl champion, three-time All-Pro, led the league in receiving a bunch of times. So he obviously deserved to make it as well. Nobody's saying otherwise. But Joe Klecko made it as far as you can make it with still losing. Just like the Jets have done 4 times for us. We get as far as we could go and still not make it to the AFC Championship game. Joe Klecko has done just that in the last year senior candidate selection process. Now here we are again. Joe Klecko has made it to being a semifinalist. Now, just to give a little bit of light on how this works, 25 semifinalists are decided in July. At the end of July, they whittle that down to 12 finalists. Okay, so we have the semifinalists, now the finalists. Then in August, the NFL Hall of Fame president selects 2 contemporaries of the players being considered a contemporary of those players, somebody that played at that time or was covering the sport at that time. 2 contemporaries come in as consultants and they discuss it with the committee on how they think this should go, their thoughts, but they have no voting powers. Then the committee, those consultants leave and they sit down together and they decide which guy is going to be selected into the Hall of Fame. So we are mere weeks away from that process taking place and we will know who is going to make it. Guys, this is the year. There is a hashtag that we need to re-engage, and that is Klecko, the number 2, Canton. I'm going to put it all over this video so you can Put out your thoughts and connect it to that hashtag. Let's re-engage this hashtag and get our guy in the hall. But let's talk about, why should we do this? Why are we continually talking about Joe Klecko? Well, Joe Klecko is a legend of New York Jets football by being a member, kind of the leader of the sack exchange, the all-around best player on the all-around best defensive line the New York Jets have ever seen. His counterparts were obviously Mark Gastineau, who he still holds the sack record in my heart, and I'm sure many of yours. He didn't have any quarterback lay on the ground to give him the record at the end of a game. Just saying. He's obviously one of them. Then you had Marty Lyons, one of my all-time favorite Jets, Marty Lyons Foundation. He is still connected to the Jets. Love him. I love everything he's doing out there. And then we have Abdul Salam. That was our sack exchange. And Joe Klecko is widely considered kind of the leader and the best of the bunch out of the group. Now, Joe Klecko was a 6th round pick out of Temple.
Being drafted in the 6th round was to me a knock. I made my mind up at that time that I'm going to give this my best effort.
An interesting little story about Joe Klecko. Did I say Joe Douglas? I might have. I don't know. I mean Joe Klecko. Joe Klecko was a 6th round pick out of Temple. Joe Klecko actually played semi-pro ball during the process of trying to get into college football. He had no one looking at him. Nobody wanted to give him a scholarship or anything like that, but he still wanted to remain eligible, so he played semi-pro ball under a false name. You want to know what name that was? He played for a team called the Aston Knights, semi-pro football, under the name Jim Jones. So if you're ever wondering about the Aston Knights and who that guy was sacking everybody, it was Jim Jones, better known as Joe Klecko. And that shows you right there his dedication, his love for the sport of football. Temple did come calling, and they got him in there. He's in the Temple Football Hall of Fame. He led the team in tackles and sacks and all that his last 3 years on the team, and was selected by the New York Jets in the 6th round of the 1977 draft. Check this out. His rookie season, a 6th round pick, he came in and got 8 sacks. 8 sacks out of the gate.
I was the right guard, so I'd pull. Willie Parker was supposed to reach block this guy, Joe Klecko. And Joe was a rookie. Nobody even knew anything about him. It was 1977. Anyhow, Willie come block him. He had 1 tackle. We ran to play one time. Tackle, 2-yard loss or something like that, Klecko in the backfield. Parker's frustrated. He's going, I can't block the friggin' guy. I don't know what they're calling the play for. Call it again in the 4th quarter, another sack. So it's 4th down, we run off the field. Willie takes his helmet off, gives it to Ray Whitehead. He said, you block him. I can't block you. We cannot block him like this.
We don't see 8 sacks very much in Jets uniform anymore, and that's what we got from a rookie back then when Joe Klecko was on the team. And let me show you a story from him on exactly his mindset going into that rookie season.
We had drafted a guy by the name of Tank Marshall in the 3rd round. And all the veterans are telling me, Joe, the numbers don't work. You know, you're the 6th rounder, he's the 3rd rounder. They got too much money invested in him. They're not going to cut him. They put him on IR. So here I was, I made the team. But that week, I remember the first team comes out and goes, all right, guys, we're going half speed. I wasn't. I came out and I busted the guard in the mouth. I drilled the fullback in the backfield, and they're calling me every name in the book. And I said, listen, guys, I don't care what you say. I'm going to be here all day. You can come out and get whatever you want. But you got a job, and I don't.
You can see the mentality. This is a guy, he's taking it seriously. He's saying, I don't really care what the, what the unwritten rules are. I don't have a job. I'm going to make it. And he probably showed the Jets coaching staff right then and there that he meant business. So in 1981, he led the NFL in sacks from the defensive end position with 20.5 sacks. The bad news, they didn't even count sacks back then.
He had 20.5 sacks before the sacks were considered in official statistics. So you look at Joe's pages on NFL.com or Pro Football Reference, it shows 24 career sacks. But that discounts his sacks from his first 4 or 5 years in the league, including his most dominant season when he had 20.5.
But he did make his first Pro Bowl in 1981 and his first All-Pro in 1981 at the defensive end position. Guess what they did? They put him at defensive tackle. Following that, in 1982, this was the year that the Jets made the playoffs. He got injured and didn't play barely at all, but came back injured to play in the playoffs just to support the team. He couldn't stand seeing his team make it to the playoffs and play without him. He had to come in and help, and guess what he did? He got 2 sacks in the playoffs.
You put a label on yourself. Whether anybody knows it or not, you put a label on yourself. Nobody can knock you out of a game. Nobody can stop you. Nobody can, take you to the point where you can't play anymore. And that's how I felt all the time. Whether I was hobbling on one leg, 1981, I played 12 or 14 games, whatever it was, and I'd shoot my foot up before a game and at halftime all the time. Nobody knew that. You know what I mean? But that's what I needed because my team needed me to win. And I think that's a big part of an individual's makeup, okay, of how much he'll put forth for his team. Because it is a team sport. It's not an individual sport.
In 1983, he moved from defensive end to defensive tackle. In 1984, he got a Pro Bowl at defensive tackle. The team switched to a 3-4 defense, and they stuck him at nose tackle. Guess what he did? He had 96 tackles, 5 forced fumbles, and 7.5 sacks from the nose tackle position. And a Pro Bowl. Imagine that. Imagine that. So we have this guy that is literally bounced around. The team just puts him where they need him. Wherever they need him, they just say, hey, Joe, we got to put you here. He goes balls to the wall. He's successful. He gets All-Pro nods. He gets Pro Bowl nods. Then the next year, they have to move him somewhere else. Hey, we're switching defense. We're going to do this and we're going to do that to you. He goes, yeah, sure. And he plays there, succeeds there, dominates there. And how many other players do you know that people in their Hall of Fame induction speech have actually gone up there and lobbied for another player to make it into the Hall of Fame? And that's exactly what Howie Long did, who has been on record saying that Joe Klecko was one of the guys that he looked up to. Let's hear what he had to say at his Hall of Fame induction speech.
Another player who influenced my career as a young player was a guy by the name of Joe Klecko. He made the Pro Bowl as a defensive end, a defensive tackle, and as a nose tackle.
So you can see the contemporaries of Joe Klecko in the era that played with him. Everybody out there says the guy was unstoppable. He was just one of the strongest guys, one of the most driven guys, one of the most dominant players in the game. But he didn't get recognized. And in Joe Klecko's words, this is what he said. He said, Super Bowl rings and championship success is a big deal in our league. We had a lot of teams that were right there, but for whatever reason, it didn't work out. Back in my days of playing, the media now is nothing like it was back then. For example, I was playing against a team, I won't mention teams or names. They had Pro Bowlers on it, and they told me, Joe, you're better than those guys. But the problem is we were 3-13 that year. Back in those days, you get zero news coverage if your team is bad. When we finally made the playoffs, that's when I finally made the Pro Bowl. When you play on a good team or in the playoffs, you get recognition. Those things matter. If you're on a bad team in the league today, it doesn't matter because if you're good enough, people still recognize you. Back when I started, that wasn't the case. So here we are. We are looking backwards. The NFL, in their wisdom, created the senior candidates. That has already paid dividends for New York Jets. We had our offensive line great, Winston Hill, inducted recently into the Hall of Fame, specifically this way, through the senior candidates. So now it's time to recognize Joe Klecko, another Jet great that more than deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. The good news, guys, we have 2 allies on the senior selection committee. One is longtime New York beat writer and author Gary Myers. He was also on Inside the NFL for a spell. Back in the day with Nick Bonacani and Len Dawson. I know, I'm showing my age. But Gary Myers was on that show then. And then we have Peter King, who was also a Joe Klecko advocate. He's on the committee as well. I think they've already done a good job of bringing him back into the spotlight a little bit, but this is the year Joe Klecko needs to get into the Hall of Fame. It is time, my Jets fan brethren and sistren. It is time. You can write the Hall of Fame if you'd like, at Pro Football Hall of Fame, 2121 George Hallis Drive, Northwest, Canton, Ohio, 44702. Go ahead and write to them with your feelings. They also have websites and web pages and Twitters and all the kinds of stuff. Or you can just support the hashtag Klecko to Canton. That's the way we're going to do it. And let's wrap it up with watching just a little bit more of Klecko's play. But this is the year, Jets fans. Let's do all we can. Make our voices heard. Let's get Joe Klecko in the Hall of Fame so this wrong can be righted. It is time. Thank you for watching, everybody. Go Joe Klecko.